What is Thought Leadership SEO? Hello and welcome to the October 2025 edition of the Majestic SEO Panel on What is Thought Leadership SEO. I'm your host, David Bain, and joining me today are four great guests. So let's meet them, starting off with Ashley.
Hi, how's it going? My name's Ashley Segura. I'm the Director of Marketing at Search Lab, and it is 6 a.m. my time. I'm in Oregon in the States, so I'm here and I'm excited to do this.
Ashley, that is very, very impressive. We didn't cover that beforehand as well. I forgot about that. So apologies again, but thank you again for coming on at that horrendous hour.
No problem.
Also joining us today is
tea.
Tea, okay. I thought you'd be injecting caffeine, but you're doing very well indeed. Christian, pleased to meet you, and thank you for coming on the panel as well.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So my name is Christian Rigg, and I'm the head of operations at 11 Writing, and I'm based in the south of France. So it's 25 and sunny here, so I can't really complain on that end.
What a show off. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Christian. Thanks so much for joining us. And also with us today is Joe.
Hi, everyone. Yep, I'm Joe Terry. I'm from Leggy, which is an equity management platform. Worked in marketing, content marketing for about 8 or 9 years now. Also at other sort of tech startups and notably Samsung for B2C type side. But I'm based in London, not as sunny, also too late for caffeine. So yeah, a bit different to you guys, but I'm looking forward to the chat. Thanks for having me on.
Never too late for caffeine. Joe, thanks so much for coming on. Also with us today is Jasper.
Hi, I'm Jasper Hamill. I'm in Glasgow, Scotland, which is really brutally awful weather. So I feel very jealous of you all. And I'm a PR consultant and journalist. I've been a journalist for 20 years. I run my own website now called machine.news. And I work as a PR consultant and copywriter for clients across the world, including in the States. And there's news on that front actually soon, but I won't give you a spoiler.
Oh, love your Glaswegian accent there, Jasper. Thank you so much for
I'm from London. Yeah, I'm a Londoner, East London.
So shall we start off with the question, what exactly do we mean by thought leadership in 2025? Shall we go back to Ashley? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think thought leadership has not changed that drastically from what it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even 5+ years ago. I think it's just become more defined and more of a strategy as SEO turns into all of these lovely acronyms that I'm not going to say because they just make my eye twitch. But as it's changing quite a lot, we're having to go back to a lot of some of the old-fashioned strategies, which is classic PR, and thought leadership is a big strategy within that PR bucket.
Right, thanks. Shall we move on to Joe? Joe, do your eyes twitch by acronyms?
Oof, every single one, yes, each letter. To be honest with you, I completely agree with the sort of PR angle of it, and I think we live in a more polluted world now, obviously, than what we did at the start of my marketing journey, let alone before that. So there's a lot more thought leaders in the world now than there ever probably has been. Whether they're listened to is something different, right? And I think that for me is what makes a difference with the whole thought leadership SEO part, is kind of where your audience classifies you as that thought leader, and how to reach them most effectively. So I think for me, it's all about points of difference and experience that sort of produces that top level thought leadership SEO content.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And Christian, what does thought leadership in 2025 mean to you?
Yeah, well, I agree with Ashley. I think that it hasn't really changed all that much in recent years. And for me, the best way to understand thought leadership is to think about what it means to be a thought leader, which is somebody that has a recognized authority in their field through significant contributions to that field. So the keywords they bring, recognized authority and significant contributions. So for me, thought leadership is all about creating and publishing content that genuinely contributes to a field and a discourse in the field in a way that's significant. So it adds value, changes the status quo, whatever. And then getting recognition for that and being seen as an authority, which you do through obviously publishing content and having it seen and ingested.
Superb. Thank you, Christian. And Jasper, what are your opening thoughts?
Well, with the thought leadership, I guess, is a way of being heard. SEO is a way of being seen. And I guess together, they're an unparalleled way to share your authority, add something to the conversation, and hopefully bring something new. And I do share the previously mentioned concerns about the level of AI slop on the internet drowning out real human voices. So I guess the challenge these days is to be as original as possible. But there always was the challenge was to be as original as possible. You know, maybe it was easier to place and get attention for SEO before the kind of tsunami, for thought leadership before the tsunami of slop. But there was still a lack of originality, and it still sank. So originality is, I guess, is still the key word, and it always was.
Lovely, originality. So hopefully we can have a bit of a conversation towards the end, I guess, about how AI is impacting thought leadership and how to differentiate yourself against that and demonstrate that originality, as you say. Shall we talk a little bit about initially the type of content that tends to work best at the moment? And Ashley, are you seeing any trend in terms of the style of thought leadership content that tends to be more effective at the moment?
So naturally, I want to say video, because video is and has been like the main primary content source that just works the best. Whether you're a thought leader or a brand, it's working really well. But specifically, the thought leaders that I follow are within the marketing industry. And what I'm noticing, the biggest trends that I'm noticing right now on LinkedIn is data. So thought leaders are taking this approach of establishing their authority in a very, very specific niche. And they're doing a lot of studies, and they're publishing micro stats from this overall study or overall trends and patterns that they're seeing. So before, you could be a thought leader by recording a video and spending anywhere from like 2 minutes to 15 minutes talking about one very niche topic and just like covering it. Now I feel like you have to do so much more to be a thought leader and really back that up with data. So if you're a marketer these days and you want to be a thought leader within marketing, let alone SEO, you need to be doing a bunch of studies right now about AI and sharing data. And people are responding more to that kind of content. And the engagement, I'm seeing engagement metrics are so much better between that kind of content versus the typical, here's that same video style, and I'm going to ramble off about thought leadership SEO in 2025 in just 30 seconds versus bringing data about what that actually looks like.
Joe, is that something you'd concur with?
Oh, absolutely. I kind of felt like my profile had been summarized quite well there in about sort of 30 seconds. So we share so much data these days. The transparency around not just anonymized customer data, but also industry trends. And I think that kind of thought leadership is diluting that into, tangibles for the audience, right? And I think that's something that we really try to do as a business now is our customers are ultimately managing equity for large businesses. So they have an audience within their own company that we're trying to enable them to benefit as much as possible. And that's what our platform does. So being able to break down the trends, share the data, and give them something that they can take away in action that will actually, help them with their role is really what our goal is for thought leadership. And as Ashley's mentioned, the results on content such as that, 5-6 times the results what we see on that sort of generic, more high level content. So definitely niche, definitely data led. And we run lots of surveys and share anonymized data to try and get ahead of that.
So Joe, well, what's the difference between good effective data that shifts the needle in terms of actually getting that piece seen by more eyeballs and data that's probably run of the mill and not as likely to be consumed?
It's a very good question, something that we battle with. And I think from my perspective, it's something that disagrees with the status quo. I hate seeing stats that back up what everyone is saying because everyone's saying it for a reason. I love to see something that kind of breaks that down and goes completely against the trend. And we've been recently trying to do that in the public space. And I think we've seen a better response with things that when you go to these conferences, when you hear other thought leaders speak, something that does disagree with that trend is really what cuts through the noise. Brings a lot more reaction, and you have to also deal with the negative side of that. But equally, any PR is good PR, right? So,
Christian, would you like to add something there?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right about the idea of, you have to be able to present something that's new, something that cuts through, and something that's innovative. And like thought leadership is all about innovation. Like it's all about doing something that's different than the status quo. And the only caveat that I would add to that is like, you have to do your homework. And like thought leadership is one of those things where you really can't fake it. You have to do the research, you have to do the studies, you have to go out and talk to people, you have to do like proper rigorous like science, the way that you would in the world of academia or in the world of research, because it's not enough just to have a voice that's kind of like counterculture. You have to be able to back up what you're saying, because otherwise the real experts in the field are going to come after you. And if if you can't hold your own against them, then you've kind of just lost all the effort that you were trying to do through this thing of like doing thought leadership.
Jasper, would you like to add something there?
Yeah, so I think the key word, to be honest, is storytelling. I'm seeing increasing kind of demand for human content that feels human, content that looks human, and storytelling is always the best way to get a point across. And it has been, and you've seen, all the way back to the beginnings of religions. How did people start religions? They told stories, they told parables. This is the best way to make a point. And I would like to say something actually quite controversial here. Like I spent years looking at the readership stats for national newspapers. I call it my PhD in clickbait. I became completely obsessed. And actually what we found in the media is people don't click on stories with numbers in them. It's a secret from the media, and that's something you'll hear said behind the scenes. And what they do click on is stories, particularly a story that feels kind of engaging and has something missing from the beginning of it, so you want to read more and find the ending. That's a kind of classic curiosity gap clickbait tactic, which, to be honest, is probably the only one that works in almost all cases when used, thoughtfully and not too obviously. So for me, it's storytelling, and I think if you can back up your thoughts with really good stories, then you add something new, and that brings a news value as well to what you're saying. If you're revealing something that has been revealed, that's a news story, and it becomes, very valuable from a PR perspective, as well as a simply generating traffic and attention perspective.
I think this is probably a good point just to bring in AI into the discussion as well, because when you said, Jasper, that people don't necessarily want the full picture to begin with, they want an excuse to keep on reading on. That seems to be the opposite to what we're told to do to optimize for AI search nowadays, because AI search seem to want the conclusion to begin with, and then relatively short form paragraphs to actually break down the solution as soon as possible, and almost doing the opposite to what you suggest there as well. So is that something that you've considered for optimizing for AI search? Are you considering that thought leadership content should perhaps be primarily focused on being published elsewhere?
Gosh, that's a really interesting question, and I can't think how to say AI optimization. I keep thinking of EIEIO, in my head. So I'm not even going to attempt to try it. Traditionally, that was how news articles were written. It was called an inverted pyramid structure. You put the story at the top, the very, very general, and then you in a very general way, and then you go down to specifics. In the internet, and we did secret experiments on this at the Nationals, to get engagement, you actually sort of fudged it a bit for humans. You removed facts, and that kept people reading. But absolutely, if that is how we're going to have to change to get the attention of AI models, then I guess we're going to have to do it. I'm always a little bit sad to have to change our techniques to appeal to machines. I remember when I keep going back to my days in the Nationals, I used to call it SEO, search engine homogenization. So because the SEO department would come over and they say, have you thought about writing 3 reasons why the iPhone's great? And I'd be like, I don't want to write 3 reasons why the iPhone's great. So we that whilst we should probably follow some best practices, I think we should be careful to keep our humanity. And actually, I suspect, front loading information with a model that's capable of digesting it all in seconds is probably I don't know. Is that definitely a tactic that works? I mean, I'm not sure.
It's certainly a tactic that is recommended by a significant number of SEOs at the moment. Whether or not it's a long-term tactic that should be stuck to, because obviously being original, being different with how you go about things is surely more likely to get clicks and more likely to get retention as well. So it's certainly not a black and white situation. Christian, you're looking thoughtful there.
I think there's a lot of interesting things in the conversation going on right now. One of the things that came to my mind as you were describing how things had changed over time, Jasper, was people's expectations. And I'm curious to see how people's expectations about the content that they consume are going to be driven by what they're presented by AI. And I think one of the reasons we inverted that pyramid has to do with like attention span and people wanting to get like really important information up front so they can scroll on to the next thing. And it's had an undeniable impact on the way that we approach SEO and the way that we approach content. And I'm curious for the future to see, we're going to influence, obviously, the content that we produce influences how LLMs, what LLMs produce and what they put out. But that in turn is also going to be influenced by what the public gets used to and what the public wants to ingest and how they want to ingest it. I think it's going to be a really interesting balancing act doing that. But the other thing it makes me think of is, so one of the things that we've always tried to do at 11 Content is not target where search or wherever people find their content is today, but where Google and others, OpenAI, whatever, like what is their goal? Because probably their goal isn't an LLM just to surface really basic top of funnel informational stuff on the internet. Their goal is to create LLMs that are going to go out into the wild and find thought leadership content and bring it back in a way that's really interesting and useful. So even if today a lot of SEOs, and honestly, with what authority? Nobody really knows what's going on right now. Even if even if today a lot of SEOs are saying, oh, you should definitely do this, you should definitely do this, you should definitely do this because that's what's working. I would prefer to think about, okay, what do we know OpenAI and these others want to achieve? Let's create content that's going to serve in 3 years, 7 years, 15 years, and try to have kind of that long-term vision, which I think is very different from what somebody might be doing just for the way that ChatGPT kind of scrambles together a bunch of top of funnel information now from the top 20 Google hits and says, here's something amazing. Yeah.
Great thoughts. Yeah, Wayne Gretzky springs to mind. I skate to where the puck is going. And
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Obviously, I have to think of that. Joe,
Canadian. Good reference.
Exactly. Joe, do you tend to optimize for machines as well as humans, or are you veering towards that?
Absolutely not. I will stay away from it as far as I can, for as long as I can, until I'm forced to inevitably become a machine myself, probably. But no, honestly, I think it's very, very interesting to see thought leadership within the SEO community, right? In terms of all of us talking about the rise of AI and what we all need to do. And I think from an internal resource perspective, you see it a lot differently to what you do from say an agency perspective, right? Where you're working with multiple brands, multiple audiences. It's a lot more general than someone like myself who works in quite a niche industry, and competition is lower. The audiences are generally older. They're not the sort of people who are impacted as much as we see on this consumer basis with AI. And I think everyone needs to remember that, is not to get carried away with, everyone's using AI for everything. It's not true. They still use all of the traditional sources, but AI is becoming something that we're figuring out, and we haven't figured it out yet. So it's still developing. The way people use it is going to change. The generational gap between knowledge and how they interact with technology is still going to exist. So older people are going to search differently to younger people, which is going to bring different results. And I'm sure they're going to get smarter too, right? Like we have with Google over the years with targeting and ads and, lookalike audiences and everything that happened. And whether it's within political spaces, consumer spaces, whatever, we can target people down to very niche characteristics. And I'm sure AI is going to work that out over time as well. And that content and the results that it gives will be more specific. So if you're doing a good job at telling that story and bringing the right facts, the right insights, the right content, I'm sure eventually, fingers crossed, if it does what it's supposed to do, AI will also put that in front of the right people at the right time.
Ashley, do you just trust AI to put your content in front of the right people at the right time, or do you actually make some effort to try to enhance that or make it more likely for that to happen?
I love that you said trust and AI, like right next to each other. That's a really fun way to put it. No, I don't trust AI for anything. And I always tell my friends and family, don't trust AI overviews. Like, it is factually incorrect all of the time. So no, I don't trust AI to show my content to the right people yet. Though we did just get our first client at Search Digital from ChatGPT. And I was like, as the director of marketing, I want to go backwards and be like, how? What was their prompt? And we weren't able to get the exact prompt info because, of course, they're like, I don't remember. I was just searching for like good local SEO agencies. I don't remember what the exact prompt was. I'm like, You could go in ChatGPT and just screenshot it, but that's okay. And so I want to go backwards and try and figure out like what made us pop up in the best local SEO agency. And those are the things of like, oh, well, we've won a lot of awards. We've been a lot of listicles. We have 4 thought leaders on the team. And so this whole concept of optimizing for AI with your content SEO, don't even want to get into it, but with your content purposes, it's just do good thought leadership, do good content, do good PR. And like literally Joe, Christian, and Jasper have been echoing, if it's supposed to get picked up, it will get picked up. AI is getting better. LLMs are getting better. They will continue to get better. So do more of that traditional content strategy of get a part of listicles, get a part of awards, get PR, like get link placements in very relevant niche publications, things that make sense. That's what LLMs are reading on top of course, reading Reddits and now social and now reviews and all of that. That's only going to continue. So the better you can position either yourself or your brand and position content to support that messaging, LLMs are eventually going to learn that and be like, oh, this is the top local SEO agency. I am going to show it to this person.
So actually, for the best thought leadership, I mean, you mentioned listicles, you talked about video as well, and digital PR. It seemed to me that you're talking a lot about getting your 4 thought leaders to appear on other websites and other publications and other videos. Is that more effective for thought leadership nowadays to be featured on third-party websites as opposed to actually try and build your own authoritative regular video show, for instance?
100%. Unfortunately, we have to start by getting published elsewhere, and then people start to recognize who you are. And if they want more of your content, they will go and find you, or they'll go click the links in other publications. Most thought leaders, especially within the marketing space, the big first thing that you get is a speaking opportunity. Once you start speaking on stages, then people want articles by you, then people want videos by you. And now there's this whole in the SaaS world being a SaaS influencer. Like there's all of these other things that support that. So I think for your niche and for your industry, what is that very first step of recognition? Is it getting on stage? Is it that speaking environment? Do you need to go and publish a book? I know that's really dramatic, but it takes something big for other publications to be like, oh, you do have a voice worth publishing. Come write an article for us. And the more opportunities that you get like that, the more that other publications and other brands are like, oh, we want to hear from him. We want to hear from her. And it just kind of continues to multiply.
Absolutely.
See?
I've got this book right in front of me here. So for audio listeners, this doesn't make much sense. But I've got this SEO in 2025 book that the Majestic publishes on a regular basis. And it's the 5th year in a row coming up. I'm just about to publish the next in the series. And it's incredible the difference that having a physical copy book can have on that perceived thought leadership reputation. Being able to give this book out to people at different events is night and day compared with just bringing maybe some kind of coaster or some other branded item. You're associating the content from an industry with your brand. And it's funny because we're talking about digital marketing, we're talking about SEO, but that's authority building that you get from something traditional like that is hard to surpass. Christian, I see you're nodding away again there as well. Is that something that you've experimented with as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to the extent that you have, but it was just making me think about how important a role like transfer of trust plays in thought leadership. And as Ashley had mentioned, like speaking engagements, and you have this book with like this physical thing. Like there's a physical thing. It was published. Like there's authority behind ideas like a published book, and there's authority behind existing platforms where you're going to present. I have the pleasure of presenting a talk at Brighton SEO in 3 weeks, and so all of the clout that comes with Brighton SEO, which is a pretty reputable and recognized thing, if you get this chance to speak there, then there's some of that transfer of trust. If Brighton SEO has trusted me to give a talk, then maybe I have something worth saying. I think I do. But yeah, it just comes back to this idea of there's so many things out there that can kind of springboard your thought leadership. And I think that finding ways to collaborate, finding ways to leverage that transfer of trust is something that works really, really well for thought leadership, for brands, but especially for individuals.
Yeah, I love that phrase, transfer of trust there. Joe, do you have any thoughts on what type of thought leadership, what type of content tends to be more effective nowadays, maybe where that content should be published and how you actually measure the success of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be honest and believable. I think based on real experiences is really the way I go with it. I think I'm quite traditional in the sense of I believe those, pub type conversations where you're quite honest with whoever your audience is tend to, I guess resonate more clearly with whoever's listening. So I think, the measurement is ultimately based on whatever it is that your goal is, right? If it's followers, if it's engagements, if it's whatever platform you put it on, like you can measure it in that way. But for me, the sort of one-to-one resonance that you get if someone hears your message and thinks, actually, yes, this is effective, and maybe they learn something from it is really what I get the benefit from as someone who speaks around, marketing and SEO. So I try to be more transparent with the lessons, whether that's the harsh realities of things that we've done wrong or whether it is the stats of something that went well. And I think that transparency just enables everyone to kind of lift their game a bit, right? And I think that's what we've seen in thought leadership, especially over the last 5 years, is that transparency around the successes and the lessons learned, and how people can elevate their game is really what resonates the most. So we're trying to do that. I think obviously in our niche area is much harder than obviously some of you guys that I think maybe talk more broadly to a much wider audience than what we would. But ultimately, thought leadership SEO is measured by its engagement and how how that resonates with the audience that you're trying to target.
And Jasper, you've worked with a lot of traditional newspaper type publications. Is that still as effective as it was for a thought leader to be actually published within there? How easy is it to actually get included, and how do you measure the success nowadays of getting included?
Well, it is getting hard to get included, actually. And the reason for that is there's many fewer journalists, because there's been lots of redundancies. And there's many more pitches, which are just being churned out by ChatGPT. It's the same sort of thing that's impacting the job market. It's impossible to get a job now because everyone's flooding applications with ChatGPT. And I think that, the point Joe made about something in the pub is a good point, because that's how to describe a news story. A news story, something that's going to get clicks and get the front page, is something you can explain to someone simply. You'll never guess what happened. And in publishing in general, newspaper publishing, magazine publishing, the news story is the most valuable piece of content. It's the thing that people link to, because they say, just as I'm saying, you'll never guess what happened, they're saying it on social media, you'll never guess what happened, look what they've revealed. And so remembering the news values, I think, is very important. And so when that comes to thought leadership, the very best thought leadership to me is something that reveals new information that hasn't been heard before. This can be, low-hanging fruit, like an anonymous case study from a customer. You're telling a story of how something changed, or you're describing, that's a case study. Ideally, you'd want to reveal even newer information. I know data, I guess, can be part of that. Data can be part of that, but ideally it's something that's actually happened. An event, a trend, whatever it is, an actual thing that's happened, a news story. So if you can reveal news stories within your thought leadership, you'll get linked to, you'll get attention, and that's after all what SEO is all about. So revealing new information, get the links, get the attention.
And in terms of data, maybe can we talk a little bit about attribution and how you can measure the impact of thought leadership? Ashley, how do you go about doing that?
I was hoping you were going to ask someone else so I could figure it out. It's so difficult. I mean, attribution for any content, let alone thought leadership, is hard. There's things that you can do, though, to do your absolute best to track that first touch point from speaking engagements. You can do things like putting a very unique QR code at the end of it with specific UTM parameters. So anyone who visits your site from that, you can attribute to, they saw me at this presentation. This is where that's from. When you're doing that with like blog content or even social content, that's where UTM parameters are your absolute best friend to try and attribute what was that first single point of source. I'm actually working on this right now with our IT and operations department on building a marketing dashboard that is able to truly identify first touch point from a thought leadership piece of content to how many other pieces of content did they then consume before they either called us or contacted or did a consult, and then what pieces of content did they consume after that before they became a client. So being able to attribute content has always been like very challenging, but thankfully there's a lot more tools now that are available that are helping track that. But thought leadership content is, I think, even more challenging because usually it's so many touch points where they saw us on a webinar and then they went to our LinkedIn and then they went to our website, and by the website they finally clicked. So UTM parameters help, but it's a rough attribution world out there.
I love the QR code to specific UTM parameter idea that you had there as well. What percentage roughly of people are comfortable using QR codes nowadays? Because I still get the sense that maybe an older generation would look at that and go, that's a pretty pattern, and then not know what to do with it.
So and I don't know, maybe this is just the States. I thought QR codes were dead because when they first came out, I hated them as a user. I was like, I'm not scanning your QR code. And when the big billboards of just a singular QR code were happening, I'm like, I'm not falling for this. And I was very against it. And I joined Search Lab in spring of this year. And we had one of my very first days, we had to order a notebook for an event that was happening in like 2 days. And it was a very last minute project. We had no time to get it to design. And I was like, you know what, let's just see. Let's just slap a QR code on the front of the notebook, which was going to be a piece of swag to hand out at the booth. And let's just see what happens. We got so many QR code scans from that little tiny notebook. And so I was like, okay, let's start putting this on our case studies that we hand out. Let's start putting it at the end of presentations that our thought leaders are doing. And so I took something that I didn't fully believe in and was like, let's test it. Let's test these QR codes. And it worked. People are literally scanning them and then filling out the contact form or insert whatever action we have them doing there. But it's working for our audience. Does that mean it's going to work for Gen Zers or insert your specific demographic? Not 100%. But find something like that unique piece of content and test it out, because just because you don't like it as a user doesn't mean that you're your demographic always. Kind reminder.
Test and learn.
Yes.
That's a great piece of advice there. And in terms of call to action with the QR code, did you actually have an explanatory piece of text beside it in terms of what people would get by scanning it, or was it just simply just the code on the item? Yeah.
No, but it worked because these notebooks, the sales team at the booth would only they were expensive. So they would only hand these out to people they were having a conversation with, not someone who just walked by the booth. So this was already someone who was just slightly warm. They weren't a cold lead necessarily. So they would hand them the hand them the notebook, and then they would go and sit down in a session, and out of curiosity, because people are curious, they'd scan it. People weren't scanning it at the booth. They were scanning it throughout the day, because we were able to track at literally what time people were scanning the QR code. It was later in the day when they were then sitting in session or going back to their hotel room.
Oh, for someone that didn't have much time to prepare for the answer, that was a really specific and great answer to give. Joe, would you like to follow that one up? Any advice in terms of how to track thought leadership?
No, I'm glad QR codes came up. I think it's interesting because I think there was one of those sort of myth-like headlines that everyone was saying that QR codes would never be adopted. Everyone hated them, no one trusted them, that kind of stuff. And you tend to see that in certain environments they work, really well. So at Samsung, we ran a project whereby people could scan a QR code, and obviously it's ultimately a hyperlink, right? It goes through to a URL, which then you can do multiple things at that point that are quite clever, whether that's present with extra value or potentially filter them down to different sort of, I guess, other websites or web pages. And that's what we did with a comparison tool that we created, whereby you'd scan the QR code on your phone. If we were able to, we would identify the device you were on, and then we would present you with specific content at the end of that journey that was, a comparison between the phone that you were using to scan the QR code and the one that you might potentially buy from us, which was Samsung at the time. And what we found was obviously adoption was a lot higher than we thought it would be. When people are looking at a phone and they're trying to digest lots of information, sometimes a nice QR code that just said, if you scan this, we can give it to you all digitally was their preference over speaking to a human sometimes, which is a shame, but also reading through a catalog of information. And we could present, a video or a web page that kind of diluted that into key messages, key points they could take away, and something that was more tangible. And I don't have the direct, how many sales we had through the QR code system. However, in its first sort of week or two in a couple of shops, we had thousands and thousands of people scanning these codes. So in actual fact, yeah, I'm a big believer in QR codes specifically because of that project. But I think it's the value that you offer on the back of it that really kind of makes the difference to that journey. And obviously a warm lead helps, but even in some instances, a cold lead will also do it. And that enabled us to track what they engaged with and, improve the content over time. But we didn't attribute sales to it, unfortunately.
Right. And Christian, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'd say so. QR codes, I think again, not to harp on about, I know we're not here to talk about QR codes, we're here to talk about thought leadership. But I think in certain audiences, as you said, they've become really ubiquitous. I don't know if it's the same everywhere else, but here in France, like menus now at restaurants are literally just a QR code. Like they don't come with a menu, they literally just like bring you a thing and you scan it. So like, I think everybody, like 18 plus has gotten into the habit of scanning them. So I agree, it's a really useful way, especially for like the speaking engagements that we spoke about, and for any like print things that you're handing out. In terms of other ways to kind of get around the attribution for thought leadership, I have two things that come to mind. The first is just making sure that you have a where did you hear about us? It's shocking the number of times we've worked with partners or consulted and they haven't had this simple question at like an intake form, or even on a sales conversation. Usually on a sales conversation it does come up. But because thought leadership, like, it is a bit more esoteric than other types of content in terms of attributions. It's a little bit harder to follow than, like ads, for example, or specific LinkedIn posts, especially when you're thinking of thought leadership as like a collection of things. And so that can help you kind of get into like the dark connections that people have in like Slack groups and these kinds of things. And then the second one is just to make sure that you have a good way of pulling together all of the data from different sources. So like some of your engagement will happen on LinkedIn and some might happen through like LLMs and through Google search. And you need to have a way to connect all of these dots. So the talk that I'm giving at Brighton SEO is all about this idea, this like framework that we came up with called multivariate attribution. And it's all about how you bring all of those things together. So making sure that the like information that you have in your Airtable or your Notion or whatever it is that you're planning your content, and you're tagging it with like a specific, like related to this thought leadership article or related to this piece of content or related to this talk. It's really hard to get that kind of metadata into something like GA4 unless you like go through the data layer, which like there's tons of problems there. So if you have a place like we use BigQuery, for example, where we pull in a whole bunch of data from GSE, Google Analytics, LinkedIn, like everywhere, like even like speaking engagements through QR codes, for example, and then being able to combine and manipulate that data in something like BigQuery and then show it in a, like Looker Studio. That has been really transformative for us and for our partners in terms of being able to see attribution at a scale that makes sense for strategy. So not just attribution at like an individual article level or at like a full campaign level, but attribution at the level of like a vertical or a category or an audience or specific product or feature mentions related to a specific type of thought leadership or a specific like concept or value that you're trying to promote through thought leadership.
Jasper, Christian mentioned attribution a few times there. What are your thoughts on how to attribute the value of thought leadership?
Well, to me, I guess it's you need to just think of what audience you want to reach and how well you've reached it. So I guess everything will be different from a PR perspective. The best thing you can do is if you get a piece in one article and place and it's ripped off by lots of others and linked to lots on social and gets a lot of traffic, then you're going to be winning. Something I will actually point out, there's a kind of an irony at the heart of journalism and public relations actually about op-eds, which is kind of what we would call thought leadership. And it's this, like they only tend to go very viral when people are upset by them. You will not see... there will be rare occasions that people will share something they agree with that either shows their expertise or demonstrates that they're part of a group, that, group identity is reflected in stuff you share. So that can be positive. But on the whole, when something gets a lot of traffic and a lot of attention on social, it's going to be because people are not, partly going to be because people are annoyed about it. I remember the last newspaper I worked at was the Herald newspaper in Scotland, and this piece was written, and it was by a rather objectionable soul, I'm going to say. I don't want to criticize him too much. People really didn't like him. He was unfashionable in the extreme. I won't spell out what that means. And his stories used to go super viral because everyone hated them. And I remember one of the comments written beneath it. This article annoyed me so much. It was a tweet. It was on Twitter. This article annoyed me so much, I'm not even going to click on it and read it. Which was such a bizarre reaction. So there is an irony at the heart of PR and journalism, that sometimes making people angry is a way to get an audience, and you have to ask yourself if you're willing to do that, because it's stressful being criticized on social. Yes, you get the big audience, but it's a horrible experience being shamed and bullied by big mobs. I've been at many Twitter storms from left, right, middle, everyone. It's unpleasant no matter who's doing it. So you want to avoid that.
Okay, well, let's finish off with asking each panelist one quick way that an SEO can start taking advantage of thought leadership today, and then just remind the listener where they can find you. So sorry, Ashley, to pick on you again. You seem to be top of the pile here again. What's one quick thing that an SEO can do to take advantage of thought leadership now, and where can people find you?
I think the quickest thing, and one of the most important, is to find your niche. You can't be a marketing thought leader. You can't be an SEO thought leader anymore. There's, as everyone has exhausted on this conversation, there's so many of them. So are you a technical SEO thought leader? Like, find what your niche is. And if you're like, I have no idea, this is where I will recommend go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, I am trying to establish my niche of what kind of content that I want to write about. What do I want to be known for? Ask me some questions to help get me there. And it will literally interview you, and you just continue through this conversation, and it might spark some ideas of, oh, I want to dive into this very technical, specific kind of topic, and this is what I want to be a thought leader in. When you have a niche, you're more likely to appear and show up. So definitely define what your niche is, and don't just be a generalized thought leader unless you love just being hidden by the algorithms. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much the best. I hate Twitter.
Thank you, Ashley. Joe, what's one quick tip that you can offer in terms of what an SEO can do to get involved with thought leadership a little bit more now, and where can people find you?
I think following on from Ashley's point there is test your audience, right? So once you have found what it is that you want to do, test what works. Write different things, share different stories, make sure it links to real experiences, real data, and try and be as transparent and honest as possible. You know, even if it does, as Jasper's mentioned, disagree with people or potentially rub people up the wrong way, if you're confident enough to do so, or support a cause with like a positive message, but link it back to real experiences, real data, test what works. And then just double down. I think that's the best way. And yep, absolutely same for me. LinkedIn's probably the best place. But if you're interested in sort of, B2B equity management, then of course, Ledgy.com as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Joe. And Christian, where can people find you? And of course, initially, what's the final tip that you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah, I would say start from a place of curiosity and asking questions from your audience, from stakeholders in your company, from users of your product, and just start getting together information and see what insights pop out to you. Because you're an expert in your industry, or at least you have some experience in your industry. So you'll see things once you start having enough conversations. And then when you find those things that are like, oh, that's actually interesting, I wasn't expecting to see that, explore it, do research on it, and then publish it. Publish. So much great thought leadership doesn't happen because conversations get left behind closed doors or in a Slack thread in your own company's, your own company's Slack. Publish the ideas, publish the interesting things that you're talking about within your own company, because a lot of times the thing that we've seen is the biggest barrier is just not reaching the finish line of getting that information out there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Christian Rake, or you can check out 11writing.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christian. And Jasper, what's your tip, and where can people find you?
Well, I'm very inspired by just hit publish, actually. That wasn't my tip, but I'm very inspired by that. So I second that. Just get it done. Say something new. I think this is the most important thing. Reveal something that hasn't been revealed before. That's what a journalist does. That's why they get attention. Reveal something that hasn't been revealed before. I often work with clients and they don't know what they know sometimes. They're so embedded in their area of expertise and they're so deep into it that they know all this stuff. They just assume everybody knows it, but they don't. Someone out there, revealing new information can be, it can be educating a wider market. Even it comes under that rubric. So reveal something new, and you can find me at www.machine.news. That's my journalism, and I split my life between that and doing PR consultancy. Sometimes I don't get the balance right. As of late, doing a lot of PR consultancy to feed the children and not a lot of journalism, but it is still there. So yeah, www.machine.news or LinkedIn, Jasper Hamill, HMILL. I am on Twitter, but I've kind of gone silent a bit. It's a bit of a gale of negativity, really, isn't it? So I tend to stick a little bit.
Thank you, Jasper. Thanks so much for all of our panel there. I've been your host, David Bain, and you've been listening to the Majestic SEO panel. If you want to join us live next time, sign up at majestic.com/webinars. And of course, check out SEOin2025.com as well. Bye-bye for now.